Bonjour Jonathan Bernstein, qui parle un petit peu français quand même, but we're not going to do the interview in English. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm well, Catherine. How are you?
You're talking from California, is that right?
Yes, from the Los Angeles area.
Los Angeles. Okay, so let me introduce you to to the people who are listening to us. So you're the president of Bernstein Crisis Communication. My English is not really good today. And you have more than 30 years experience in crisis management. You're very famous and recognized specialist in crisis management in the U.S. And in the past, you've done many, many things, including working for corporate companies, agency, non-profit, etc. And you've been a journalist also. And the interesting thing also that can be linked to what you do now is that you're a veteran in 5 years in U.S. Army military police and military intelligence counter-terrorism operations.
That's correct.
Okay. You are a self-admitted internet nerd. Me too, by the way. And you have written a blog / newsletter, and you've been writing this for now, God, I think you started in 2000. Is that correct?
That's probably right.
All right, so which means it's about 15 years ago that you already started, before everyone started, a blog and a newsletter. That was about crisis management, and it was aimed at crisis manager to teach them what to do. You have written 3 books, and one of them I'm reading now. It's The Manager's Guide to Crisis Management. And then you have another book that is actually now available for free on your site. It's called Keeping the Wolf at Bay. Is that correct? And it's a media training, about media training. And we will put the link and all the information for people, regarding your book, and for people who want to get this one too. You've appeared in many TV and radio channels in the States. I'm just going to name the one we know here. BBC, Fox, NPR, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, USA Today, CNN, etc., etc. All of this to say that you are a very, very famous expert in crisis communication. Everything was correct?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know quite how famous I am, but I guess my name is fairly well known.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so today I would like to talk with you about steps that companies need to take to prevent, because here we talk mainly about prevention. We don't want the crisis to happen, so to prevent a crisis. And you wrote in 2013 that 95% of American organizations remain unprepared or underprepared for crisis. How is it today, 2 years later?
I think it is slightly better. Awareness of the need to prepare is growing dramatically because every crisis is on the internet these days, so people read about it, and boards of directors and shareholders and even insurance companies are starting to demand that organizations be prepared.
That's amazing because in America, and I don't think we have this, not in Switzerland because I've been inquiring, but in America, you guys have, companies can have lower insurance if they show they're prepared for a crisis. Is that right?
They did not used to. That's starting to change. In Europe, my understanding is, in many European countries, this has been more of a requirement for some years. But in the United States, we've been slow to catch up on that, unfortunately.
Okay, but that's interesting because in Switzerland I've been inquiring and talking to insurance companies, and none of the ones that I talked to were doing this already. So hopefully it's going to happen soon, because I think it's really interesting. Now, you're talking about when you anticipate a crisis, that basically it's all about preparation, to prepare your team, to get together. Can you talk a bit about what you call crisis preparation, or vulnerability audit also?
It's all part of the process. And the best analogy I've ever used is the analogy of professional firefighters. The people who put the fires out when fires burn in a home. And the people who are not so well known in the fire departments are the fire inspectors. But they're the ones who actually save the most money, because when they go in and look at all the ways that your business could burn, they recommend ways to prevent that. And there is a direct counterpart to that in the public relations crisis management area, where we can go in and sit down with management representatives from a company, and by asking them a series of questions, which we call a vulnerability audit, we determine where they have weaknesses already and where some of those weaknesses can be completely eliminated in some cases, or where they can be made stronger so that when they do have a crisis situation, they're able to respond much more quickly and much more appropriately.
Okay. So basically, so this means that you do the audit, and then you create a crisis plan. And in this plan, there's a lot of different things. One of them is that you have identified the crisis communication team beforehand, right?
Correct.
So who is in general, and who should be in the crisis communication team? Because we all think it's only like the CEO and the PR people, but in reality, it's not exactly this, right?
Right. Well, in reality, every employee is a crisis manager for the company, whether the company wants them to be or not. So every employee needs to know what they're supposed to do or what they're not supposed to do during a crisis. So that's the very fundamental level. But in terms of the people who are actually involved in crisis response, there's usually a core crisis communications team, which is the fewest number of people necessary to make a decision quickly. So that might well include the CEO, an attorney, their public relations or crisis management counsel, and perhaps one or two others. But then there are other people who are identified to be added to the team depending on the type of crisis. So if it's a legal crisis, you have a different team than if the crisis is your manufacturing plant is burning down.
Yeah. I want to just get back to something that you say, because it's really interesting when you're talking about the fact that every employee is potentially part of the crisis team, but every employee is also a influencer in a way. And I remember reading about, a few years ago, the FedEx crisis, where one of the employees was, quote, throwing a computer over the fence, and the employees of FedEx they had such a good company culture that when this crisis happened on the internet, they all went out by themselves, the employee, to talk and say that it didn't represent them. So do you think this is because they really did a good job as like corporate identity beforehand with their employees?
Well, and it also reflects the fact that that part of a crisis plan is establishing policies such as social media communications policy, so that everybody understands what's okay to say and what's not okay to say about a company. Everybody has a right to express their personal opinion, but to speak about the company as an employee makes you sound like you're a spokesperson. And so employees need to be educated about the difference. But every employee, has their own circle of contacts, online and offline. And if they are educated in advance about the benefits and the risk of communicating about the company during a crisis and told who the official spokespersons are, then they are much more likely to direct communication to the right person and not speak quite so freely themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's talk a little bit about monitoring systems. We talked already quite a lot in the podcast about monitoring system and monitoring, to prevent a crisis. I want you to talk to us about the notification system.
Uh-huh.
This is a system, like more with SMS, text messages, etc.
Right. Yeah. There are many companies now which provide this service to organizations, which allow by, if you access them by phone or by computer, they can send your messages out to any group that you've pre-identified. You create lists in advance. So one list, of course, would be your crisis team members. So I am on the crisis team for a number of my clients, and when they have a breaking crisis, this notification system keeps trying to reach me until it gets through to me. It'll try my cell phone, it'll try texting me, it'll try emailing me, until I push a button to confirm that I've received the message. And that way, the team leader knows that I am aware of the situation and that I will do whatever it is I've been directed, which is usually getting to a quick conference call with the team.
Okay, so this means, and I'm sure it's being done already, even though it doesn't look like everyone does it, unfortunately, it could be that if there's like a tornado, we can notify people, like we have every single name, in the region of the people, and they could be notified. Is that being done already, or?
Systems already exist that you can do that with. Not every company uses those systems. A lot of companies are still calling people one at a time, and that slows response down. And one of the rules of our business is the slower the response, the more damage you take. And so having these notification systems allows for much quicker response and reduces the damage.
Okay, so like, for example, in the case of, I hope it's never going to happen again, but a tsunami, the countries could have such a system in place, like that they could reach every single citizen to tell them, okay, you have to run or something like this?
Well, there's actually now a system. There's actually in the United States, there is a system which allows emergency authorities to basically notify everybody who's publicly got a phone number listed instantly. Okay. And that's a public service. That's not even anything they have to pay for. So that the local Los Angeles County Fire Department, for example, could put out a notice that everybody gets instantly. There's the same system. There's also a notification system in the United States when children are kidnapped. Yeah. And if a child, and they're called an Amber Alert, and you can choose to receive or not choose to receive Amber Alerts on your phone. And if you choose to receive it, if there's been a kidnapping immediate in your area, immediately a loud noise comes on your telephone, and you look to see what the details are. So these systems already exist for public service, and there are also private versions of the same thing. So for the private versions, you have to put the names and contact information in yourself.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so what about developing holding statements beforehand, of course, I guess. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes. Usually, well, always, the types of crises to which an organization is most vulnerable can be identified in advance. Categories, such as accidents resulting in deaths or injuries, or embarrassing lawsuits, or improper handling of finances. Those are all common crises for many types of organizations. And the company or the organization can agree on what they would say in the first 12 to 24 hours after a crisis, long before the crisis ever happens, and make sure that their CEO is okay with the messages, their lawyer is okay with the message, so that you don't have to make these things up on the spot. You might have to adapt them slightly to the situation, but you don't have to completely start from the beginning. And so a crisis plan will include these holding statements, these initial statements, for typically 15 to 20 common scenarios, or scenarios that are common to that organization, so that to give them a quicker response when the crisis happens.
Yeah, but you were saying 12 to 24 hours, but I mean, today, wouldn't they respond directly on social media, and that would mean within the hour?
Right. I'm not saying they wait 12 to 24 hours. I'm saying that this is information that they use during that, anywhere from zero to 24 hours.
Okay. So let's just go back now to the, I'd like to know what you're advising for monitoring systems, what you've been telling your clients to use as far as monitoring.
Well, it really depends on their budget more than anything else. There's some very expensive systems. Cision, C-I-S-I-O-N, is one of them, for example, that monitors social media, traditional media, produces very nice reports, and there's one that's particularly good in North America called Custom Scoop that's more affordable. But there's also free systems. I mean, the most basic free system, of course, is a Google Alert. Yeah. And then there are monitoring apps like Hootsuite, Hootsuite, that has a paid version as well, but even the paid version is cheap. And that can be used to monitor across multiple social media platforms. Yeah. And,
that's really good. We're using it, and it's not very expensive. It's really good.
Exactly. We use Hootsuite most commonly, and we have a Custom Scoop account. And that combination, and Google Alerts, that combination works well for us. If one of our clients has the budget for a fancier system, great, that we're happy to use that. But we haven't found that much benefit in crisis management for the more expensive systems.
Yeah. And another thing that I wanted to ask you is in your book, because when we monitor, obviously sometimes there's some maybe negative comments, etc. But in your book, you're telling us, you're talking about the C factor, the credibility factor, right? Meaning that it's not because someone just says something that we need to jump on the whatever you call it in English, but and we need to really analyze who is this person. Do they have credibility? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes. When we have a new client who's being criticized online, for example, the first thing we do is look at as much biographical or history information about the person who's making the complaint, and do other people seem to agree with them? Have they been successful at harming other organizations? Do they, in some cases we find that they have a personal interest. Sometimes we find that they're actually competitors of our clients.
Yeah.
And also, what is their writing style? Sometimes when a person rants, when someone just talks in a wild and crazy way, they undermine their own credibility, and they're not a major threat because other people see them and say, "Oh, that person's a little bit crazy," and they're not too worried about it. The dangerous person is, in terms of influence online, is the one who sounds very credible, who writes like a very good journalist, and who seems like they're telling an accurate story, even if they're not. If they come across,
that's what we call astroturfing.
Yes.
When people do that, right?
Oh, yeah. Astroturfing is misrepresenting, really, what your motive is. But for example, as a consumer, I have gone online and complained when an organization is not, and I write well, and my comments sound credible, and if anybody looks into my biography, they see that I'm credible. So I'm a dangerous critic to an organization.
And you're an influencer because you have a lot of influence on social media and a lot of followers.
Exactly. So if I go on Twitter, if I don't get a satisfactory answer after I try on the telephone to get a satisfactory answer, I'll go on Twitter and I will send a message saying, "I'm not getting a good response here. I would like to be a happy customer, but and usually someone gets back to me right away and we resolve it. Every now and then they don't, and then I'm a critic that does harm because I'm credible. But on the other hand, I've seen people on business review sites that there's no way anybody's going to believe what they wrote, and so they're not a real threat, and they don't have a big following, and so if they don't have a lot of followers on Facebook or Twitter, and they don't write well, then they're not a threat. So that's the component of credibility factors.
Even though we need to be careful, because if an influencer speaks up on that not credible person and decides to retweet, for example, then it can be dangerous.
Yes, and it depends on who the influencer is. Exactly. You always have to monitor, and that's why monitoring is so critical. Often what we recommend to clients is we don't think this is a threat yet, but let's continue to monitor and see what happens. And so monitoring is absolutely critical part of crisis prevention.
Okay. Well, very, very, very interesting. We're going to have to finish here. I will thank you very, very, very much, first of all.
You're welcome.
And we will put all your contact information, your links to your books and your blog and your site and everything near the podcast. And vraiment, merci beaucoup. Je parle aussi un peu français. Donc voilà, thank you so much for doing this, and I hope we'll get to talk to you again soon.
Good, my pleasure.